It began with a sound that no one was ever supposed to hear.
He's the one who saw it?
Yes, he says he pulled the girl out of the car.
I would like you to forget about her.
Okay, hello and welcome. And I know I have a tendency to say this every show, but I am super excited about this show as well because it's a long time coming. So before we get too deep into things, I'd like to welcome to the show Shon Wheeler, who is a friend, fellow podcaster, and owner of Scare Flare Records. Shon, welcome to the show.
Hey, excited to be here.
So for those who don't know the history of this, I did say at the beginning I was very excited about this because it was a long time coming. And for those who are familiar with my Quentin Tarantino show, more specifically my Pulp Fiction show, Conversations at Jackrabbit Slim's, you were one of two guests that I still need to have on the show if and when it comes back. And I know that for this show, the GOAT, the De Palma show, you were one of the first people that signed on. So I'm glad that we're finally a couple episodes in and bringing you on board. Before we get into today's movie, which is going to be 1981's Blowout, do you want to sort of set things up for us in terms of what your sort of Brian De Palma experience has been?
My first memory, I was born in 78. I'm 46. My first memory of a De Palma film is I was about 6 years old and my uncle watching Scarface on Betamax. And I remember just like, I'd never watched adults watch a movie that were like, they were yelling stuff at the screen the whole time. And he knew like every line in the movie and everything. And I remember the chainsaw scene, and then there's a few other things in there too that like I vaguely remember, but that's my first one where it's like I almost viewed it like a horror movie.
Mm-hmm.
And then I think the first one that I ever saw was that I actually went and saw. I think I had a friend's house was The Untouchables. And then shortly after that, I saw Carrie, obviously, which I'd already read the book, being a Stephen King fan and everything. And then like Pulp Fiction came out and I was working in a video store and just went nuts on Pulp Fiction, Reservoir Dogs, True Romance, all of that, and was reading all the stuff coming in and ended up going and finding Blowout because he kept talking about Travolta's amazing performance that led to him going, you need to cast Travolta in Pulp Fiction because they didn't want him.
Yeah.
Because he was doing these $200 million Look Who's Talking movies at the time. I mean, who would want to hire him? You know?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So, yeah. And I was a huge fan of your podcast. I was driving a forklift around for 12 hours a night. I think I listened to everything in your podcast over 2 nights. And then that led me to Scott. Now I'm really good friends with Scott and I co-host with Scott. And
I've said this before. That's like my biggest takeaway from podcasting is the connections you make and the people you make. And I have international friends now. I have people around the globe that I can say are my friends, and hopefully I get to meet in person one day. But yeah, I do want to sort of talk about the connection between this film specifically and Tarantino, because I think in a roundabout way, my exposure to De Palma definitely, I mean, I was always aware of him. You know, I knew the name. He was a brand name filmmaker like Spielberg or George Lucas or Robert Zemeckis or whoever you want to say.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, I think it was Tarantino sort of singing his praises and then especially pointing out that, like, you know, Travolta had a lot of tools in his tool belt, if you will. And without Blowout, Travolta would not have been in Pulp Fiction.
I don't think so either. And he, like, you see a lot of stuff that Tarantino does that you see De Palma did too, like in Blowout. We're going to talk about the Blowout scene, and it looks, and then you were just talking with Scott about Snake Eyes and the whole intro to Snake Eyes. It almost feels like in Blowout, he was practicing to get to do the scene in Snake Eyes, where if you watch Reservoir Dogs, the breakfast scene, he goes and does it in Death Proof in one shot. And it's like, he didn't have the confidence back then to do it. And then he did it in one shot. But then you watch, you know, these two movies, and I guarantee if he could have done all of that in one shot where he just pulls out from everything, he would have.
Yeah.
But I don't think he knew how or had the confidence to do it at that point, even though he had, what was this, like his, you know, like
13th film.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So like even after 13 films, and then he gets to Snake Eyes, and it's like, you know, fuck this. I'm going to do, you know, a full 14, 15-minute intro with, what is there, 3 cuts in there that are
Yeah.
you miss if you're not paying attention. So
Yeah. And that's another thing that I like about it. And yeah, I don't think there's anything wrong with a director taking a stab at attempting something that they've done before with the intention of saying, I'm going to get it right this time.
Oh, and he perfects it.
So yeah, like I said, this is his 13th film, came out in 1981. It was sandwiched between Dress to Kill and Scarface. So that's quite a 3-film run. So for those who don't know, Blowout is kind of like De Palma's take on sort of the, I guess for lack of a better word, like the thriller conspiracy craze that was kind of big in the 70s.
Yeah. Almost like the Zapruder film a little bit added in there with was it Chappaquiddick? Is that how you say it?
Yeah.
You got all that. But you also have a lot of slasher elements in this. There's some of that. There's even some co-ed comedy stuff sprinkled in here and there. That there's so much stuff in this pack. Like the first time I saw it, I ordered it into the video store I was working at, and I watched it 3 times that day. Where like, because people kept coming in, and I'm like, "What are you watching?" And it's like, this is a great movie. And then like I think I went 15 years without seeing it. I got like the new Criterion 4K, which is just gorgeous, and watched that a bunch of times over the last like year since I got the 4K, because it's such a good movie that anytime. So
yeah, it's one of 3 De Palma films that are part of the Criterion Collection. The others being Sisters and Dress to Kill.
Yeah, which I love him because he always gets bunched in with that, the Brat Pack and everything, and he's such the edgier filmmaker that he's going to places that the other ones wouldn't dare to go. Other than Scorsese, like Taxi Driver is the closest thing that you're going to get to a De Palma film from the rest of them, pretty much. There's a few things sprinkled in, but he's so methodical. It's almost like he's got like autism or something, the way he hyper focuses on stuff.
Yeah, so. And I've said it before. The other thing I really admire about De Palma as a filmmaker is he's not afraid to get down and in the gutter, if you will.
Oh no,
get a little dirty, get a little sleazy, but still maintain that sort of art house aesthetic. Where you said, a lot of his contemporaries wouldn't do that. Like Francis Ford Coppola surely wouldn't do that.
No, and like I was so excited because that Tarantino thing, the movie critic, I thought it was going to be like a De Palma thriller. That's what I was thinking. It was going to be something like that. And then, obviously it's canceled. I mean, we keep going back to Tarantino, but like it all ties together.
Yeah. So I think before we jump in the scene, maybe just a little bit of your overall thoughts on the movie, aside from the fact that you said you're a big fan of it. But I mean, this features another really, really interesting performance from Nancy Allen.
Yeah.
Who we talked about previously on the Carrie episode. And like those 2 performances are about as far apart as you can get.
Well, and I'd never watched these back in the day. Like the movies that were in it. Like I knew her from RoboCop and
Murphy.
She's kind of hidden and out of sight, or if you kind of blink, you don't even notice it's her. But going back and revisiting these movies, like I told you before we started, like I'm not the world's biggest De Palma fan. There's a lot of these films that I really like and respect, but it's not something I put on a lot. This movie is. I'm one of the few people out there that you're going to hear that, is like, I loved Mission to Mars. And I'll be, whenever you do Wise Guys, I'll be the guy that'll be like, I'll talk about Wise Guys because,
Yeah, it's funny. I do have a commitment for Wise Guys, but the great thing about this show is we do multiple scenes. So I'm sure we'll pick a scene to do from that.
I love that movie. My dad has a very unique laugh. And I remember the first time he brought that home and I watched it with him because Captain Lou Albano was in it and I was a wrestling fan in the 80s. Yeah. And he steals that whole movie. He's so good.
I watched that within the last couple of weeks. There's a page on YouTube called the De Palma Archives, and it's not very active, but what they've basically done is they've uploaded, and nobody's given them a hard time about this. They've uploaded De Palma films that aren't available like commercially through any like legitimate studio. So they have a nice widescreen print of Wise Guys. They've got a lot of the early 70s comedies he did, like Get to Know Your Rabbit and things like that. The De Niro stuff, some of which I haven't even sat down to watch yet.
Yeah. I haven't seen any of those either.
Yeah, but really, really interesting. So, yes, Nancy Allen. We've also got John Lithgow. And then we've also got just the amazing Dennis Franz.
Oh, yeah.
I think most of us know him from NYPD Blue. But man, when I started watching a lot of films from the early 80s, he pops up in that Psycho sequel.
There's something about him that he has a little bit of sleaziness to his look, but he's a very eloquent actor. And yet
Yeah.
he's got that New York. There's the scene in Blowout here where he does the TV. He's doing the interview on the news about giving over the photos, and he's
Yeah.
like, "Yeah, so I'm out there testing these lenses, right?" Like he just is so confident in what he's saying, but he looks like a sleazeball.
Yeah.
Yeah, and like I loved him in City of Angels. He's so good in that, where
Mhm.
he's like the cancer patient and
Yeah.
everything. It's
Mhm.
really like it's like you feel really bad for him because you know he's dying and everything, and then he doesn't, or yeah. So
Yeah, no, I'm so glad that he was able to have that amazing sort of second act where he got I don't even remember how many Emmys he won for NYPD Blue, but
yeah.
I'm sure that from a creative standpoint, that show was pretty fulfilling for him, and also I think for his overall finances and his retirement account.
Yeah, because in this movie, he's really just a sleaze bag. You can, and Lithgow, like this movie, I saw this movie after I saw Harry and the Hendersons, and it like ruined Lithgow's character for me.
Right?
In that.
It's amazing the way that De Palma used Lithgow. And I mean, I know he played villains before. He popped up as sort of the villain in Cliffhanger.
Yep. But people had forgotten about that when Dexter came out because he's the Trinity killer on Dexter.
Yeah.
And people forgot about it. It's like, how can you have this guy do it? Like, go back and watch De Palma films. Like he's sick as hell in all those movies.
Yeah, it's remarkable. So the scene we're going to talk about is John Travolta plays a movie soundman, and he's pretty much working on low budget Z grade type films.
My wheelhouse.
Yeah. And the interesting thing about the setup for this scene is I think it's pretty funny that the need for new sound effects pretty much drives the entire narrative of this film. Like, if the director didn't give him a hard time about using the same sounds over and over and over again, he wouldn't have gone out to do some new field recordings.
Yep.
And of course, I can't not mention, which kind of pays off the whole movie, the terrible scream that was captured in the opening sequence of this film that needs to be replaced.
Yeah.
And I think it's I don't know if I'm intelligent enough to explain it properly, but the way that De Palma ties all that in, De Palma wrote this film as well, ties in the replacement scream that ends up getting used. I don't know. It just seems like he threaded a needle that was pretty intricate. And I always appreciate seeing how he gets there and how it psychologically impacts Travolta's character as well.
Yep. Almost as much as the dead cop.
Yeah.
That, like has affected him for years and led him down where he's working on B-grade movies. And he used to have this really good job doing stuff with sound. And now he's not. He's kind of a shell of what he was. So there's also like where you see like he's looking for redemption, I think, through all of this is why he's trying to do this and uncover some stuff, that is happening where it's a political thriller that, like you were going to go more into with the storyline thing, but he ends up getting like a political assassination on just the audio of it.
Yeah.
And he's standing on this bridge in the scene that we're talking about. Well, we talked about these two scenes kind of that piggyback each other, but he's just standing there and like recording sound with the weirdest looking mic I've ever seen. And he's just standing there and it's like, it goes from the rustling of the leaves and the movement in the water. And then he picks up a conversation of a couple, and then there's a frog and he's getting, and then all of a sudden he's picking up like this internal timer of a stoplight, like a timed one off to the side, and then all of a sudden he gets this owl and everything, and he's waving this microphone around.
Yeah. Well, the greatest split diopter shot De Palma ever did is that owl.
Not only that, like, there's another shot of that owl when he's going back through it later, where the owl turns around and it's the car thing is coming at him. It's such an amazing shot. And you guys were talking about how like normal directors would just have the printed word on the page and you're just going to get a shot of an owl. And then you're going to get a shot of Travolta, then you're going to get the car, and not with him. It's methodically thought out of how can I make this the most interesting and eye-appealing possible on screen for everybody to tell this story without it just being this boring crap that everybody else is doing. And it's so thought out of how everything, like, look at the frog shot. Every time that frog croaks, the camera moves a little bit further back to first it's one bridge, then it's you see this giant bridge behind him, and it's such a beautiful shot. And then you like all of a sudden you look and the frog is in the all the way in the foreground, perfectly in focus. So is everything else in the back. It's such a beautiful shot, and the way that it's done and everything. And he's up there and he's got this microphone, and it's just like he's conducting a symphony with it, going back and forth. And then when he goes and he listens to it later, he's doing the same thing with a pencil, where he's just kind of closing his eyes and going over it in his head like he's conducting a symphony. And it's such a beautiful way of doing it, where it could have just been him standing there and there's sound, and all of a sudden he would have turned around and here comes the car, and then he's in the water. And then you've got even a little spot where the guy is under the bridge, which he pulls. It's a giallo thing where you blink, you're going to miss it. It's almost like if anyone's ever seen Deep Red, the whole movie's given away in the first 10 minutes of the movie, but if you blink, it's gone.
Yeah.
But here's the same thing. If you're watching the action, you're going to miss, and then you find out like 15 minutes later that there was somebody there, but still, it's so many layers, and it's not even like an onion that he's got layers on. It's like harder than that.
Yeah,
there's so much beautiful stuff going on in this scene. And then even like he goes back and he listens to the tape, and it's everything that you just saw, but different angles of it. Like he was doing like 2 or 3 cameras at a time. And it's like, he's so restrained, and it's like a master at work, but he never gets the credit for it until recently.
Yeah, absolutely. And I do like how you sort of described conducting. And I think, if anything, probably especially at the time, this movie introduced people to the idea of soundmen in Hollywood. And he kind of explains it to the Nancy Allen character.
Yep.
When you hear a door close or something, I put the door close in. I think it's a really interesting sequence in the sense that, like you said, the way he captured it, the way we sort of follow the movements of the shotgun microphone, and we're seeing the internal process that Jack goes through to build sounds for his personal library.
That's not just what's going on in this. Normally, in your reality of movies, the camera does not lie. But what he's proving through this entire scene is that the microphone doesn't lie. Everything that he's pointing at, you're seeing, so that's a frog, that's an owl, that's a light with a timer in it that you can hear clicking, going through and everything. And that's what he's doing, so that when you hear all of it later, you're fully on board with what's going on with the Travolta character, which Travolta, Grease, Welcome Back, Kotter, Urban Cowboy, he's always playing some doofy version of Travolta. This is the first movie I ever saw him in where he's playing it straight. Like he's just a normal everyday guy that's, just happened to be in the wrong place at the wrong time because his boss is being a jerk. And then he ends up falling in love and everything else. And, and he falls in love with her like right away. The look on his face when she starts giggling in the ER and stuff, you can just tell, like, even if he wasn't in love with her, he was that at that point. So,
yeah. One other interesting thing I like about this sequence. So the first half of that sequence prior to the car crash, it's very, very focused on the sound in the environment. And then as soon as the crash happens, we get that bombastic score.
Which is restraint complete, because he could have been playing, anybody else would have played that beautiful score under all of that. He didn't. And then it kicks in.
Yeah. And that's another thing I really appreciate about De Palma is what he doesn't do in a sequence is as important as what he is doing. And I think that's something that doesn't get talked about enough.
Yep. That's like the Untouchables with the baby carriage scene. Give that to anybody else. Watch what happens. You watch that scene and it's like, oh my God, like who thought this up? And I guarantee it wasn't written on the page like that. I've never read the script, but it's probably not.
If you know David Mamet's not writing out that kind of, those kind of beats. Yeah. I'd imagine the David Mamet script is a lot of dialogue with very, very little else going on.
Yeah, I know that De Palma was like, we could do this, how slow he talks, everything, and then he always throws in a holy mackerel in it. I saw the same documentary. Like you could do a drinking game to him saying holy mackerel.
Yeah. So you did mention before we came on that the two sequences we're sort of covering are sort of broken up by Travolta and the Nancy Allen characters in the ER. Do you want to sort of skip to the editing bay where Jack is listening back to what he captured?
And basically, it's almost the same as the scene before. It's just you're looking at it through a different camera, is all it is. And there's that shot of that owl. Like you see him, and then the owl turns around to look at the car coming, and it's like I've never seen anything like that in another movie. And that's the part like because this is like 9 minutes in to the movie, I'd say. Like
Yeah,
and
yeah. I did check my watch when I watched it yesterday. Yeah,
yeah, so it's like 12 minutes in, and then you get like the 4 minutes of the actual blowout sequence, and he's in the water trying to get her out. And then you have the ER, and then it goes back where he's listening to it again. Did I hear that right? Because he thinks he hears a shotgun blast or a gun blast.
mm-hmm.
He's listening to it, and it's just the way that all of that is. It's you give that to the hands of any other director, and I don't see it ending up like this at all. It's just a complete, probably a mess because. I mean, how do you film this with such, beauty to it? And I don't even know what the word is. It's like a symphony when you watch it and then that music kicks in and it's like, oh, like all of a sudden he's built up so much tension through all of it because you're waiting for something to happen. And it's funny because the movie is about a sound man and the sound men in this movie are the real stars of the movie. They did such an amazing job with those two scenes that I mean, even that, and then you get that scene later with the 360 scene. That whole thing. Look at the sound design in that.
Mm-hmm.
It's amazing. I can't believe they didn't win an Academy Award for this movie for all of that.
Yeah, and it's funny. On the Scarface Carlito's Way episode, I talked about depending on what side of the fence you're on. Blowout's definitely a masterpiece, and Carlito's Way is probably another masterpiece. But I think if you really start weighing the two against each other. This one was written by De Palma, which I had kind of forgotten about when we had when I had my discussion with Brian Sword. But I was like, you know what? I mean, if you're really going to make an argument, written and directed by Brian De Palma, and again, it's interesting because, like you said, how would any other director have handled this sequence? But I really wonder, as the writer of this, how much De Palma actually committed to the page versus just knowing what he was going to execute.
Well, it makes you wonder if he was just storyboarding the movie as he was writing it, because there's so much thought that went into this. You don't just sit down and go, I'm going to have this, and this, the way that it is. Because it's just every time that there's a sound, the shot changes. And it's so like, just everything is so thought out on the page. And he thought out every possible thing and using the trick the trick lenses and stuff like you were talking about, where I was like, I didn't even know what it was called because there's not very many examples of this where you see it this fluidly in a movie. Normally, he's known for the split screens and everything else. And there's some of that going on here, but like, unless you really, it's like trying to figure out the Kubrick, how did he do the shot over the maze with the people running, and it's, it zooms in on the maze and all of a sudden there's people where you try to figure out how the hell did he do that? And I still don't know how he did it, but I don't want to know. Like Fincher is another one that does all this type of stuff. David Fincher is just a brilliant. You watch Fight Club and there's some scenes in there that remind you of De Palma as you're watching it. Where like he's going the building and it goes through the floor and you can see there's like mouse nests.
Yeah, I think Fincher is probably the best modern filmmaker you can use it as an example when people start shitting on like CGI. And it's like, well, CGI is as bad as the artist that is using it.
Exactly.
And, you talk about the amount of FX shots in a movie like Zodiac.
I was just going to say,
people won't believe you, but it's like, yeah, that's an FX heavy movie.
The building scene where it's like a montage of the building getting built that is there now and famous. That is a master at work on everything he does, from Alien 3, which I will get in a fist fight on, to whatever. I don't have Netflix. I don't know what he's doing now, but that Mindhunter stuff, like brilliant shit.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Even The Killer I haven't
seen it yet. So
really, really interesting watch. So I know we're getting to the tail end of things. Is there anything you had noted that you wanted to address that we didn't sort of hit in our conversation?
No.
Okay.
I love the fact that he's finally getting some love. I mean, it's taken me a while to appreciate him. I think it's as I've gotten older, I started to appreciate his movies, where when I was younger, it was like you've got like Scarface and Carrie and a few of those. And now you're going into the back catalog. Like I told you, I've never seen Carlito's Way.
Mhm.
And there's a couple of them in here that I haven't seen. The only one I've really ever seen that I was just like, I do not like this is the Black Dahlia murder.
No, yeah, no, it's in a movie I don't ever plan on talking on this podcast.
Yeah.
And I think that's part of being a fan of somebody's. I know it's short for fanatic, but you don't have to like everything the artist did. One thing I did want to loop back to, though, is when you were talking about preparing, and as a big Hitchcock fan, it wouldn't surprise me if De Palma had plotted out everything he was going to do, because if we know how Hitchcock worked, there's lots of stories about Hitchcock being bored out of his mind on set because he was already thinking about the next movie he was going to work on, because in his mind, the movie was done.
Yep. I've read that too.
Yeah. So this was really cool. I'm sure we're going to come back and talk about Blowout several other times on this show, but I do appreciate your perspective. And I think we got to talk a really sort of meaty sequence. So before we go, if you want to talk a little bit about the podcast you do with Scott, and then more importantly, if you want to talk about Scare Flare Records.
So I do. Scott was on here earlier, one of your episodes where he does the Church of Tarantino for season 3. We actually have 3 seasons of this show called Inglorious Blue Balls. And we discuss all of the films. He didn't even mention it when he's on there. Like I'm nothing to him, apparently. We talk about all of the teased projects that Quentin Tarantino has blurted out and talked about over the years, or people have reported on that he's never done, giving all of his fan base blue balls about the Vega Brothers and Kill Bill 3 and all those movies that he's bullshitted and talked about that never happened. So we go in and we cast it. We talk about the music, what the film would be shot like, what we think he would do with it. We give the news that's been about it and everything. Like the movie Critic was canceled. We had like a show within like 3 days and it was on, So like, that's what we're doing. I will be starting a podcast actually after kind of what you're doing, but I will be doing as a sister one to the Church of Tarantino, the Church of Carpenter, where
so good.
My passion is John Carpenter besides Tarantino, to talk about the films of John Carpenter. I just need time to get to sit down and work on it. And then on the side, like I do horror cons a lot. I sell vinyl records and I own a small record label that has put out, we did Frank Lalagia's Lady in White. We did Terry Gilliam's Time Bandits for the first time on vinyl. I did The Grand Duel, which is some of the music that was used in Kill Bill that had never been out on vinyl. We actually hit it on its 50th birthday for release. So we do stuff like that. I'm all over the place. If I like it, I'll do it. We did like the fan film Never Hike Alone, which is part of the Friday the 13th stuff. But I mean, it sold really, really well for it being a fan film. You would have never guessed that it was. So I don't know if anybody hasn't seen it. It's really good if you're a Friday the 13th fan. So
yeah, excellent. And I'll include a link to all of that and where people can find you in the show notes here. And I just want to say that I am so on board for the Carpenter show. For a long time, he was my favorite filmmaker, and I'd still argue with anybody that the run from Halloween through They Live.
No, you got to go back, dude. Assault on Precinct 13.
Well, yeah, but I'm just saying, if that run,
even Elvis, he did an Elvis TV movie with Kurt Russell. It's just unreal how good it is.
I think that run of films is untouchable. I really think that no filmmaker.
Other than Tarantino, there's maybe Spielberg. Because, I mean, you can't really put Lucas into there, or Coppola had some real horrible movies. But yeah, like that's why I was attacking that one, because I love those movies so much. I've seen them so many times, and no one has got a podcast about it. I even had the guy that did the Texas Chainsaw Massacre, The Shocking Truth vinyl release that I did. It's a documentary about Chainsaw Massacre. He did a John Carpenter theme song for me and everything for it. I just need time to sit down and record all this stuff. So like I actually have like original theme music from a real film composer.
Yeah.
So like I just need time, and that's something I don't have. So
yeah, well, I will volunteer myself, and I say this to anybody that wants me as a guest. I am not afraid of any Carpenter movie. So if you need to fill a gap in his filmography and there's a film nobody else wants to talk about, even if it's The Ward, I saw that in theaters. I'll be there, man.
I'm hopefully going to do one a month, and then I picked his 12 best, and then season 2 will be the leftovers, and then maybe like I think I'm going to follow Scott to make fun of him, and I'm going to do like a whole season just on Halloween or something if I can get that far into it, just to be a smart ass. But
oh, nice. Well, hopefully you find the time to do it. I think a lot of people that don't podcast don't entirely appreciate how much actual work goes into it. not only do you have to watch a movie, you have to sort of maybe watch the movie more than once in a short period of time, take as many notes as you think you're going to need to express yourself, sit down and record it. And then after you're done recording, you have to edit it and clean it up and make it nice and presentable for all the people that are going to listen.
Well, and I suffer from, like, I got a little bit of autism. So, like, for this, I watched that scene, I think, 5 times. I'm not going to come unprepared. Like, yeah. So I'm overly meticulous as well. And
yeah,
this takes time and stuff. So and if anybody ever needs a guest to come and talk shit about movies, hit me up. So
yeah, excellent. Well, I do appreciate all that prep work you did, because it makes my job easier. And I hope we can sit down and chat either Carpenter or even De Palma again at some point. So, Shon, thank you so much, and we'll talk again soon.
Yep. Thank you.